Welcome everybody to our hub88 Tech Talk. Just quick announcements. As some of you may have heard, we announced that we will be acquired by 1871. We signed that definitive agreement several weeks ago, and we're just going through the final closing process, and we should be getting that wrapped up here shortly, and complete the transaction. And once the transaction is completed, then we can start sharing more information about integration and plans like that. But with that, I will then turn things over to Lori Swanson, and our wonderful program coordinator. So Lori, turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We got a little bit of a late start, so I apologize for that. Hopefully we had, I don't know, 30-ish sign up, so people will keep adding them as they come in. As Matt mentioned, we are continuing to move forward with our relationship with 1871. So that's all very, very exciting. But business as usual, as far as we're concerned. So this is the May 2021 Tech Talk. And before, just from a logistics perspective, you are more than welcome to put questions as we talk, put questions into the chat. You can also, we're happy to let you ask questions. As Nancy, who I'll be introducing in a second, the moderator, to her preference. So she'll let you know about that, but certainly putting them in chat, and I'll be moderating as we go. What's up next for hub88 is on June 9th, we'll be having a stellar panel of women C-level executive tech execs. So, and talking about myth versus truth, women in technology post-pandemic. So that should be a very interesting conversation. We have Susan Davis Ali, who is the founder and president of Leadership One. We have Kimberly Fahey, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer from Collegius Education. Donna Gallagher, who is a fractional cybersecurity and data privacy risk advisor for Fair Risk Quantification. And then our very own Michelle Piazza, who had been part of hub88 since the inception, will be moderating that panel. Without further ado, let me introduce to you tonight's moderator, Nancy Monroe, also a longtime member of the advisory board here at hub88. She is on the programming committee with myself and is the CEO of Verbal Transactions, which is a voice enablement technology company helping using tech to have better human interaction. And beyond all of that, she's also a singing nutcracker at Christmas time. And her favorite quote is "a place for everything and everything in its place," which I think says a lot about you, Nancy. I've decided I've got to start collecting quotes to get to the inner psyche of people. So what is your favorite quote? Hey,
yeah, when you raise 6 kids, you got to have rules,
I had no idea you had 6 kids. Oh my God. Wow. Okay. So yes. Nancy, please take us from here. And again, everyone, please engage, ask questions, be a part of this conversation. I think we're going to learn a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lori. And I look forward to our discussion today. I don't know where all our attendees are, but I'm sure they'll jump on as we continue. But I want to have our panel introduce themselves before we begin diving into the questions. So I'm going to do it alphabetically. So Damien, would you please introduce yourself? Unmute yourself, though. There you go.
My name is Damien Di Rosario. I'm founder and CEO of V2 Verify. We're a company that uses natural language processing and biomarkers in a person's voice to confirm a person's identity. So basically, our why is we simplify life. We use about 2 seconds of speech and we confirm a person's identity. If our technology is being used in any environment, you don't need to have pins, passwords, answers to challenge questions. All that is eliminated. All you do is speak and we know who you are. And that's what we do.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Jennifer.
Hey there, I'm Jennifer Metz, and I'm an executive director of product management at Comcast, where I run the voice and NLP product team for our voice remote services. And our NLP also powers our chatbot experience for customers. On the voice remote side, we work at pretty incredible scale, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about what we do.
Awesome. And John Foster.
I'm John Foster. I was the co-founder and CEO of iQdo, which was a startup that I'd started to focus on voice enabling mobile apps primarily, and we sold it in February.
And could you tell us who you sold it to?
I can't officially, but you can Google it. It's out there.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. Well, since, hub88's roots are with 5G technology, I want to ask each of my panelists, what, if any, impact do you think 5G is going to have on your technology platform?
Well, I'll jump in. We didn't think of 5G as either an enabler or having any particular impact on what we were doing. We were a service that worked fine over the existing cell network. So it was one of those, we did get a lot of questions about, particularly from carriers, is this a reason to sell 5G, which was kind of what they were after. But we didn't really have any particular interaction with it.
Sure. Damien, what about you?
The 5G has helped us. It does enable us to perform better. I guess the speed and the cleanliness of the data transmission does help us a lot. We work with any network, so whether it's actually a phone call or on the data band, so it doesn't really affect us, but having a clean, fast data band does help us, does improve our performance, and we can be down to 5/1000th of a second authentication time on a 5G network.
Okay. And Jennifer, what about you?
Gotta be honest with you, this is the one question I'm passing on because I don't really care how we're connected as long as it works. So but this is not my company's area, so I'm passing.
Okay, so while I have you with your mic unmuted, what are some of the challenges with the remote control of your TV remote? I mean, I'm sure many of us in this session have a Comcast remote that we talk to on a daily basis.
I think there's a number of things we could talk about from the software development standpoint. As all of us know, there's always ways to fine tune your system. And when you're handling with voice technology, speech recognition, everything from ASR through NLP to your action resolution, there's always places where you can make tweaks. And we use machine metrics to really help us understand where friction is happening so that we can go in and, put surgical fixes in place or rethink the pipeline if there are places where we think we need to make some pivots. One area that we're focusing on right now is how we understand different types of accents. We've done a series of labs to help us, crowdsource more people with different types of accents and who speak with different types of dialects and things like that. It's been incredibly helpful to do that because the more data we have, the more our machine can learn and make better predictions on what people are saying and get them to the right place that they want to go. One recent example is there's a show called Them, and we actually had to sign up a bunch of employees to help repeat the phrase them into the remote a couple of times. And
Yes.
You wouldn't think, but like the pronunciation of TH can actually be really difficult to decode depending on your accent. So it's been actually such a great way for us in this pandemic environment with everyone remote. We can just say, hey, we just need your device ID, say this a couple of times, and then we can crowdsource it. It's been actually kind of amazing to be able to pull that off in this remote environment. So
yeah, I was going to ask you because the technology we're using Microsoft's SAPI speech engine on a PC. And so we use the built-in Improve My Speech wizard that's built into Windows. You give any thought to saying, let's let the remote learn your voice kind of profile?
I would say I'm very interested in that. That's absolutely something we'd love to explore more. But right now we just want to make sure that we understand the phrase you're saying, getting to your identity. I think that's the type of thing that's a little bit next gen for us.
Right.
So,
right.
And with the volume of commands we have partners in 4 countries speaking 5 languages. So there's a lot of places where we'll see machine metrics and we need to dig in and figure out what's going on.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you. That leads me to a question for Damien. I've had experience with biofeedback voice technology. And so you don't really care what language someone is speaking, correct?
That is correct. But we don't. I mean, we're language agnostic and we're device agnostic. However, where we also struggle sometimes is on the NLP side, because one of the things we have done is we have shortened the amount of speech we require to do an authentication. So, we're talking about 10 numbers, a word. But what happens is when you have one word without a sentence, you really can't use NLP that well because there's no context to the speech. So like Jennifer said, the word them, well, it means nothing. There's no context to an actual sentence.
Right.
So therefore, it becomes really difficult to figure it out. So as an example, if you actually have an iPhone and you do your speech to text and you say, I want to go to the bar too, it'll actually put TO. But if you actually say full stop after, it'll actually put TOO because it's actually got context to that sentence.
Right.
But if you just say the word to, it doesn't know whether it's a TWO, a TO, or a TOO, right? So when you get when you're working in that space where the speech is so short, NLP becomes really, really complex because there's really no context to what you're trying to get the machine to understand. And that's when accents and dialects become really complicated. So we actually use a combination of both. We use speech as an identification, but we also want to know what you said so we can actually get two things out of the one sentence you say or the one word you say, right? Mm-hmm. So the biometric and the identification side works well. The NLP is where we can struggle, and we've done a lot of work on trying to teach our machine learning to actually learn some of these commonly used words that people are using just a word without a sentence.
Right. And so would you say that's some of the biggest challenges you've had, or have you had other challenges beyond that?
That is one of our biggest challenges. The next biggest challenge is signal to noise ratio, right? So background noise. I mean, you've got a TV running, and you're trying to, give Alexa an instruction. It's picking up everything around that environment. So trying to figure out what is the actual speech, who is the actual person saying it, with all that background noise, and trying to eliminate that background noise, that's our other challenge. And we've got a lot of technology around that. But those are the two areas we focus on is that understanding what was said, but also reducing that signal to noise ratio and trying to pick up the actual speech and ignore everything in the background.
And so give me an example of how somebody's using your technology today.
So the technology can be used on say a mobile app or a web portal as a login. So we've actually got customers that don't use user IDs and passwords. They want to log into their mobile app. They want to log into their portal, online portals. They actually just basically speak. We have a patented technology on how we actually can link any device anywhere in the world using to a mobile phone. And what we do is, so they speak into their phone, they say 10 numbers, whether it's your phone number or random numbers, and we'll confirm the authentication and the login. So it's really about simplifying that process. But we have a couple other use cases too. We have a use case around COVID assessments. We've actually figured out that there are some biomarkers in speech that can help us predict your possibility of having COVID to about 82% accuracy rate. So that's another place that people are starting to use it for things like events, trying to have in-person events and pre-screen some of the people before they walk in the door. And the other place is actually in remote workforce management, where you have people with certain credentials or certain IDs that are not in an office space, and they need to show up at a person's home, like maybe a nurse at a person's home, just to verify that the person is the right person before they enter the facility, whether they get a garage code to open the garage door. Before you do that delivery, to make sure that the correct person actually showed up at the place. So those are kind of the use cases that our customers use in the technology today.
So Jennifer, you guys could use that for the people that come and put Comcast in your house. Because I just had another phone line put in a week ago, so a guy's coming to the door. He says he's Comcast, but do I know he's the right person? So you and Damien could work together on making sure that person's who they say they are.
I think that's a fascinating idea, and I'd be happy to look into
it. Great. So John, because your team worked with a lot of different apps, and you've had a lot of experience with startups, and so a lot of our attendees tend to be in that entrepreneurial space. What does the tech stack look like? From a, I want to start a company and I want to be NLP or some use of voice technology. What would somebody have to consider when they put a tech stack together for this?
It's pretty deep. Ours was pretty extensive. As you look at it kind of broadly, there's voice recognition, which we did not do. That we used with whatever was available on the devices that we were working on, so we could use Google, Siri, Alexa, whatever it was. Our view was that space was highly reliable, it was highly available, and it's also incredibly expensive for a startup. And we needed to focus on just the things we needed to focus on. So then from there, once we have the words that were spoken in transcription, then we operated on that. We began from there with an NLU platform that had actually been developed by a company in Ireland that was a sister portfolio company of our venture backers. And when we got started, we started talking with them. They had originally started doing semantic search on the web, and so it was natural language understanding from the standpoint of a command of some sort of search type of command. So it's a difficult problem because it's typically a short string. It's not, you don't have a lot of context, as Damien was talking about. We have a little more than just a word or two, but in the context of you're going to give a voice command to an action in your mobile apps, it's going to be relatively brief. So that was the challenge. And what the team in Ireland had done was to really focus on responding to natural language understanding, intent detection specifically for a short command. And so that was, and like I said, they had 12 years of experience when we acquired them. So they'd been at this a long time, and that was really important because this part's really hard. Getting the correct intent. And then once we understood the intent, then because our goal was to not just sort of open an app and say, here you go, it was to actually execute the action in the right app. And so then in the team that we built here as kind of the startup side, we built a team that was focused on mobile apps and had deep expertise in mobile OSs. And what they were able to do was to, first of all, identify the correct app, right? If the intent is ride sharing, then there's, a half dozen apps maybe globally that really would serve that intent. And then we look to the user's phone to say, all right, which apps do you have? Do you have Uber? Do you have Lyft? Do you have Grab? What's the right app to open for you and actually execute the action in it? So it was a pretty extensive platform that we built. And then, of course, all the tools that go along with that to enable, and we were a B2B seller, so to enable our partners to be able to then turn around and sell that in a pretty turnkey fashion. So it's a deep tech stack. We didn't actually spend too much money on it, but there was a lot of time and investment into it over the years.
Now, this is for everybody. And I've run into this myself because I don't code. I try not to be a coder. But, there's going to be a day where I'm going to need a deeper bench as far as resources and skill sets. So who are you hiring right now? What's the background of people that you're hiring to, continue to build these types of applications?
Because we were a startup and, we're competing with the likes of Facebook and Google, it was hard. We really had to work hard to find good people. If you were going to go build out a team, we were fortunate to start with, good senior team and then build out from there and be able to leverage the knowledge and the background of our senior guys to be able to hire some younger guys who could just jump in and learn lots of things and spend a lot of time doing it. So I would put in a plug for Ireland, though. The talent that we were in Belfast in Northern Ireland, the talent base over there is incredible, really good, and they're very committed workers. We didn't lose anybody through the entire time that we had our operation going over there. It was really a good team.
Interesting. Jennifer, what about you?
Our employees are largely stateside, and we have made a real push to have a diverse workforce, which means when we go looking for people, sometimes we have to dig a little bit more. But I'm thrilled because we've been able to bring in a lot of people. My team is half female. We have a diverse racial and ethnic mix, which is great. And I think that helps with both recruiting and retention, and it helps reflect our customer base because, we're a very large company that reaches a ton of people in this country. I want to make sure that what we're building to the extent that we can, reflects our user base. And, you know, obviously there's lots of attributes for diversity. It's more than skin deep. So, you know, the more the better, but, you know, recruiting can be challenging, and, you know, it's always good to hear how other companies are handling it. In our case, though, I'm really looking forward to us finding new ways to like reach potentially new employees through different pipeline programs with universities and the like.
And are the skill sets like Python or data scientists? Obviously, it's probably in part of the team, but you know, what are the programming skills that languages that you're using?
So on the machine learning side, we have a pipeline program where we're working with some universities that have books coming out. For the more systems engineering type, we're looking for people with Java skills. Java still is an amazing platform for us. For my team, I run the product team, so you don't necessarily have to be a coder. Sometimes it helps to be able to at least understand the concepts, but we want people who understand the business needs and what our stakeholders are concerned with as well.
Sure. And I guess, Damien, you're probably a little bit different because of the biofeedback side of it too.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have the same struggles in hiring tech talent. You know, our code base is all C++ because we do have some very complex mathematical algorithms built into what we do. We're fortunate in that I'm still a coder, so, you know, I'm kind of CEO, CTO, and I still write code probably 30-40% of my day. And I've got a couple of engineers that have been with me through a couple of different startups. I've done several startups in the tech space. A couple of engineers have actually moved on with me through those startups. So, you know, two of the guys have been with me 10 plus years. So the three of us generally can guide the newcomers in easily. So what we do is we're actually kind of different. We go to high schools. We're happy to hire out of high school if you got the right skill set. We don't need a college degree a lot of times. We'll hire out of high school if we believe you have the right aptitude to code. But we also go out to universities, and from, you know, freshman year, we'll actually start offering internships. We find that those internships, summer internships, actually turn into programmer jobs. Our systems are kind of unique. They're not standard systems, so we don't need someone with 30 years programming experience.
Okay.
We need someone who I can go to, you know, like I did 10 years ago and say, I think a computer should be able to recognize a person's voice. Let's go figure it out. And everyone looks at me and goes, well, that can't be done. And it's like, no, a human brain can do it. So why can't we do it? Let's just go figure out how. So we need outside the box thinkers. And so therefore getting people straight out of college sometimes or out of high school, it has worked for us because they don't have that ingrained kind of limits that a lot of big corporations will put on the employees to say, you know, this is what a computer can do. We're willing to take a chance and go out and try something new.
That's interesting.
I mean,
yeah, I'll give a plug for the Illinois Science, Illinois Science, IMSA, Illinois Math and Science.
Yeah, it's IMSA, Illinois Math and Science Academy.
So these kids get picked. Yeah, so they get picked to go to high school on a campus. And I'll tell you what, these kids can dance and program circles around some of the more seasoned people that I know. So going for high school kids is a great idea because, I mean, you know, some of these kids eat, breathe, drink, you know, computers and programming and just apps and things like that. So that's a really smart idea.
Well, and give them the opportunity and give them some chance to get educated beyond that. You know, you find that what we do find is that there are sometimes underprivileged kids that don't have the ability to go to college. But if we can get them working and help them get an education at the same time, it actually does help. And that's where you get loyalty, right? I mean, in this world, tell me a tech company that can keep 2 engineers for 10 plus years. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But you build loyalty by providing that service. I mean, you know, my 2 senior engineers, they'll go anywhere with me because they're just loyal. That's how I found them.
That's awesome.
They're loyal. They're company people. They're loyal to me. They're loyal to the company. And that's hard to get, especially in an R&D role where it's not a 3-month project. This could be a 5-year, 3-year project trying to figure something out. So replacing someone is really costly for us.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So while you have the floor, I'm curious because the pipeline just getting hacked, cybersecurity, you know, we've had that as a tech talk before. And so how do you see maybe your technology, you know, being a good barrier to some of these cybersecurity hacks going on?
Well, we believe it's actually putting us in a really good position, and for a couple of reasons. A lot of these hacks and a lot of these intrusions today happen through people don't come in through firewalls anymore. People steal people's IDs, people's credentials, and that's how most of these hacks happen. I mean, there's a high percentage of hacks in the world today are through intrusions using credentials. I had a privilege of talking to an FBI agent in this area that runs the Midwestern area at one point, and he actually pointed out that sometimes these hackers actually are in a network for up to 6 months before they actually hack the systems. So they will learn who's in there, what they're getting in their emails. They'll actually really learn who people are, and then social engineer them to actually hand over important credentials and then get into the system. So while everyone's building these extremely secure networks with, $1 million firewalls and stuff like that, no one's really paying attention to the actual user credential, because when my user ID and password are used, all anyone knows is that it was my data used. No one can confirm that it was me that used it.
Mhm.
Where we come in, and that's why we believe we're really set in a good place, because where we come in is we can confirm the person that's using it, their identity, right? And we use speech, so it's a very simple process. You don't have to remember anything, because the more complex passwords are becoming, not some of these networks now require 8 to 10 character passwords with
Yes.
special characters, uppercase,
Yeah.
lowercase. People start using the same password across all platforms. Now, one hack on one platform
guilty.
opens up every channel, right?
Yeah.
But if I tell you that your authentication doesn't require a PIN, doesn't require a password, doesn't require you to remember anything, all you do is we will display some numbers on a screen. You just say it, whatever you see on the screen. It's simple. It can't be stolen. It's simple. It provides dual factor authentication all in the one shot. So we really believe that the more of these kind of hacks and the more of these things happen, it makes technologies like ours more and more important.
Yeah. Now, John and Jennifer, are you seeing voice being used as a security application too?
Sorry, Nancy, I want to ask Damien one question though, because we'd heard about deep fakes and some concerns about voice authentication, that deep fakes might actually be able to fake those out. Nancy, I don't want to hijack your panel
Sure.
here, but I was just interested to know what your view on that was.
Well, John, that's a great question. So one of the things that we did was so I come from a enterprise payments and security background, right? So I've been working around financial transactions and financial transaction security for 30 years. So we came at this and we figured out that even when we started this, deep fakes were starting out, the early stages of this were starting out. So what we figured is that when we looked at a voice on a spectrogram, we actually see that there is a section of voice that you can hear, that the human ear can hear, but there's a massive area of wavelength that we create that we can't hear. So one of the biggest things we did was say, well, if we want to get away from the deep fakes, we've got to start focusing on that spectrum that no one can hear, because the deep fakes don't really care what you can hear. They only care about what you can hear, because they're trying to fake the human ear, right?
Right.
So a lot of the technology we use are actually in that segment of speech that we make a wave pattern, but the human ear cannot actually pick up. And that's why the microphones we use, we've actually got to have a reasonably high quality microphone, like a mobile phone microphone, because we can actually pick up that area, and that's where we actually work with. So today's world, deepfakes can't beat us. In 5 years, obviously they will improve as they find out more about what we do. So we've got to stay ahead of the game. But in today's world, it's not a concern for us. The other thing is recordings. Most people ask about recordings. Well, we use completely random speech, right? So display 4 random numbers and repeat it, display random words and say it. So therefore, recordings, unless you can get a person to record every word and every number combination, it's just impossible for it to get. We've done a lot of study on how fast people react to a screen image, how fast people can normally speak when they see something on a screen. So we know on average how quick a person will speak when they see something. So we actually monitor for a lot of those kind of things. So if you try to record, me saying the numbers 1 through 10 and then trying to cut it and paste it and get it into a word, we can pick stuff like that up. So the deepfakes and recordings, today we're ahead of the game.
Interesting.
Oh. Wow.
So Nancy, I will address your question though. So we didn't, we worked with a partner to do voice identification, not so much authentication, but if what we were focused on was like in an automotive setting and you had multiple people in the car who, what we were doing was connecting your phone to the car's head unit. And so the speaker could say, I could be driving, and so I could say, you know, play my music on Spotify, and it would connect to my version of Spotify on my phone. And if my friend was riding the car with me, he could say, you know, play my playlist, and it would identify his voice as somebody else and connect that, identify that, associate that with his phone and his music app. So it was voice identification, but not authentication. We were not getting to that level.
Is that also speaker detection, or is it different?
Yes, I mean, that was the idea, is identifying who the speaker was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And Jennifer, what about Comcast? Are they doing anything with voice for security?
We have an entire division that's focused on security, and I can't necessarily speak for the work they're doing. I'll say within my team, we're definitely interested in the identification side of things, but luckily we don't have, we're not generally through the voice remote going to be releasing sensitive information. But I will say that it's definitely an area of interest across the board, because there've been there's been a lot of news about speakers that are listening and things like that, the Alexas of the world, and people's comfort level, privacy. Luckily, the technology we use is push to talk, and so we know that the customer is initiating that they want to have a conversation with us, which I think is an important attribute in any discussion about this technology. But as the gentleman mentioned, this is changing, the landscape is changing, and where we are 2 years from now is probably going to be very different.
Have you had customers call and say, I know it's listening to me, my remote's listening to me?
Well, I mean, listen, the number of calls we get a day, or chats, I can't speak to that across the board. I will say the fact that it does not listen unless you press that button, probably makes people pretty comfortable. Our data shows that generally people are very comfortable asking their TV to do something. And I think about growing up, my grandfather would yell at the TV all the time. So now all the grandfathers in the world who want to yell because their team didn't make a home run or whatever, they now have the opportunity to do it.
Now, are there plans for the remote to talk to the person to say, hey, you watched the show last week, did you know it's coming on in 10 minutes?
We're always looking for ways that we might want to interact with our customers. We do have a talking guide feature, which is actually an accessibility feature to help low vision folks traverse and find content that they want to watch. And it'll read out to you what the text is on screen, the information or metadata about shows, things like that. There's an interesting component of that we've talked about with personality, should we have a personality? And I think that's the type of thing you're talking about. I wouldn't rule anything out, but no imminent plans on that front. But it's an interesting idea, and we certainly want to have that type of conversation with our customers to make them feel like we know what you like in a non-weird way. Hey, we know that you're interested in the Chicago Cubs, or maybe it's the White Sox, and here's you. Guess what? They're at bat, or it's a no hitter. Tuned to blah blah blah. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, oh, totally. That's some of the things that we're looking at in my world is, observing something. Let's say you're using Salesforce.com and you're not halfway to quota yet, and it's the 15th of the month. The bot's going to say, hey, Nancy, the 15th of the month is around and you're not near quota where you need to be. What are you going to do about it? So having it observe and coach you, or have some kind of conversation with you based upon observations of past history or behavior. So I think that's coming, and it's actually very doable today for a lot of organizations, but we have not been asked to build that yet. Very good. So, John, let me ask you another question. Going back to the woke word or push to talk, have you seen unique woke words? So if you don't know, when you say Alexa or Siri, hopefully none of them are listening to me right now, that's considered what's called a woke word, to let the device to say, I'm going to start listening to you.
Yeah, so we didn't, we could enable wake words we call them wake words, but we could enable those, and you could allow for customization. We had a partner that actually did the transcription of the voice to text for us, but it could be anything. And so our guys, all of our engineers, as they're testing these things, they all would come up with their own wake words. So you'd hear in our office a whole bunch of different things, right? And a lot of them are nonsense. and some of them were not repeatable. And so there was a whole bunch of them around the office.
Sure.
I think it makes sense, right? People want to have voice is personal. People want to have a personal experience, and you want to address. You don't want to say computer. You want to give it a name, right? I mean, it's. I think that's what you're going to see for sure.
Yeah. No, I've even read studies where employees will trust a bot now more than their manager. So look out,
Yeah.
Because it's non-judgmental. It's just, you're gonna have this conversation, and unless you design it to be kind of snarky, it's just gonna be, a nice conversation with the bot. It's not non-judgmental, shall we say.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want my bot coming after me on the 15th at the end of the quarter to say, hey, you're a little below target here. What are you going to do?
Yeah, well, your manager can't be everywhere, So Damien, let me ask you this. Are you held to any kind of regulatory or government requirements for your application?
We are. In the biometrics space, most countries have regulatory requirements to actually keep the biometrics in country. So that was one of our biggest challenges as a startup. We needed to be able to build a technology that can run in the cloud, on any cloud provider, and on premise, because as we're selling, we've got customers through Southeast Asia and some of those countries don't have an AWS service, for example. If we want to have a customer in that country, we can't keep the biometric data off outside the country's borders. So there is quite a bit of complexity in building a startup in this world, because we needed to be able to run that software, take our software out of AWS and throw it on a server platform in some data center and actually make it run. So yeah, there is some regulation around that. There is also some regulation about privacy. And the other concern that most people have when it comes to biometrics, especially, is that, well, if someone steals your face or your voice as biometric patterns, well, you can't change that. It's not like a password.
Right.
So we have had to do a lot of work around the security on that, make sure that we don't store information that'll allow people to be able to rebuild a voice. For example, when we actually store our biometric patterns, we actually eliminate some very key information out of that stored information, so that my voice, for example, cannot be reverse engineered out of that pattern.
Okay.
Right. So those are the kind of regulations we're dealing with, because it is not like a password. It's a bit more complex. You can't change your voice. You can't change your face. Once you get into biometrics, there's some very strict guidelines about how to deal with that, and that's something that we focus on a lot.
Does that fall into, I don't know if it's called PCI compliance, or
depending
card information?
Yeah, well, it depends on the industry. So PCI, our software does have PCI certification, because a lot of our middleware actually comes from our banking software background. But PCI only works inside a paper platform, right? And so you've got HIPAA certifications if you want to go into medical. So we do fall into many of these categories, and that's like I said, for a startup to take on a product that is so horizontal is quite a challenge.
Yeah. So I don't know if Jennifer, if you ran into any kind of government regulations, since it's your communications company, have you run into that before?
Oh, yeah. I would say this, like, we operate in many different municipalities, states, in the United States, and then in a couple of other countries. Our company has good relationships with the various regulatory agencies, and we have huge teams of people who work on this stuff, because we do have to meet our obligations. We are regulated in a way that startups might not be. But the things that Damien brought up, like GDPR, is something that we had a lot of people looking into, making sure that we could meet the requirements both for the EU side as well as the UK, because we operate in both. I can't really get into details on how those negotiations and decisions happened, but I can say that we do take care with how we manage our customers' data, how we handle transcriptions, all of the things that Damien brought up about, like, what stays within the territory, the footprint of that agency, so to speak. And we certainly have a team of people looking at new privacy regulations, many of which are on the table right now, which obviously will affect how people interact and how they own their own data over time.
Sure.
There's a
And this is
space
for
that-
everyone on the panel. Did you going to say something, John?
Well, I was just going to say that we had to do quite a bit of work around GDPR when we launched. Our first launch partner was Motorola, and so we had to be GDPR compliant. And it's very complicated. It was, just an emergent set of rules at the time with no safe harbors. So you really didn't ever have sort of, if you do this, you're okay. And then we faced a lot of questions like, because people, our whole thing was natural language, and so people could ask whatever they're going to ask. So we had lawyers pose this, well, what if somebody said, show me my HIV results? Now you're subject, you've got sensitive personal information.
Right.
And even if we're not storing it, even if we don't even really know what that command is, now we can have a real issue. So the problem I'd say with the privacy rules right now is that they're so new, and so there's very little regulations supporting them. So it's hard to know, are you going to be in trouble or are you not? In the end, we sort of relied on, hey, we're so small that nobody's going to notice us. But we had to go through the full workup of making sure that we're compliant. It's difficult.
And to add to that too, if I may, one of the other problems we're running into in that space also is that a lot of countries now are expecting, in some countries, I won't name any, but are expecting that we actually have publish decryption methodologies for some of our data in case the government authorities want to actually get access to data, which makes companies like our job very complex, because the moment you create a backdoor, now you're going to try to secure the backdoor. Now you've actually created a problem in your own product, right? So what we've actually had to do is, in some places we just won't do business just because we believe that creating a backdoor in our technology is just not a good idea, even for law enforcement, because you just don't know. I mean, you have a staff member that leaves, they know how to get in. Now you just created a major problem. So some of these regulations that are going on today are actually done without a lot of thought. And people's privacy can be affected in a big way just because some of the people writing this regulation just don't really think about what the ramifications, the long-term ramifications of stuff like this is. And creating a backdoor into any security platform, it's like saying, well, I've got a secure lock, but here's a master key and I'm just going to hide it over here. Someone finds it, you got problems.
Yeah. Are there, for all the panelists, are there countries that are adopting voice technology more than others? I mean, is there one that's really, going to town on it? I would think maybe Ireland with the developers they have over there.
Well, what we saw actually was the biggest uptake was in Latin America. For whatever reason, some of the big applications that we had down there that had just huge usage were things like Facebook, and in particular WhatsApp. People love voice messaging, and it's a great experience. If you've ever sort of gone through, especially if you're in the car trying to message somebody, if you can do that effectively with voice, and I would just say, I'd tell Pamela I'm on my way home, and it would choose whether I'm going to send that through text, through WhatsApp, through whatever app I most normally would talk to Pamela on, and just send it. That's exactly the experience people want, right? I think this, and our whole premise was the touch screen is it's a technology that had its day and suited the device at the time, but it's going away. And voice is a far better technology to address our, how do we interact with our technology?
Yeah, and hands-free too. With COVID, you think of, not wanting to touch things right now, still, even though. So that leads me to my other question for all of you, and this was asked of us too. How can we prove that our voice technology doesn't contain bias?
Well, I can start with that. I mean, we don't listen to what you say as just the tones that you make, right? So from an authentication perspective, we don't have a bias built in because we're just listening to the tones you're making, just the sounds you're making, right? Where we actually try to interpret what you say is when we do what we call liveness. So we may show you 4 numbers and expect you to repeat, and then make sure that you said it, but also that you said the 4 numbers that we asked you to say. It's no different than texting you a pin and asking you to enter it, right? In
Right.
like a one-time pin. So from that perspective, our technology really doesn't have any bias built into it. There is really no. We just don't know who you are. We don't really care who you are. We're just listening for the tone and in some cases what you actually said, so we can action something based on that.
Okay. Jennifer, do you have any, like, has somebody pressed you on that as far as the bias in your AI?
I think absolutely it's something we're cognizant of, and I think it's an industry problem, quite frankly. Like, this is not, specifically my company. I think
Right.
any company that uses machine learning, especially at scale, needs to be careful about what the machine learns. And so the way that we're looking at this is, can we create fairness models? And can we create like an automated fairness model that we can run automated tests on and just see over time, like, how things are progressing? Like, how is it learning? How is it distinguishing between group A and group B? Are we showing different results when people ask for group A than when they ask for group B? And quite frankly, I would love to see the industry at large find new and better ways to manage some of these problems that are historical. But we are definitely cognizant of it, and it is an area we're looking into.
Yeah. No, I was lucky to find a third-party study for the Microsoft platform that we're using with low word to error word to error rate. So I sent that to the client that asked for it, but it was Walmart. Walmart was asking the questions. The only time I've ever been asked, can we demonstrate the level of bias that we had in our AI platform? So I don't know, John, if you were ever asked that.
No, because we were dealing really with a very personal situation. You're giving a command into your phone, and so we're looking for actions on your phone. So we really didn't have that problem of, taking who knows who this person is incoming and trying to find the right solution for them. It just wasn't the way our system operated.
Interesting. Yeah, it's there was another study that I found around the voice as far as female versus male voices. And I've spoken at the Amazon Voice Conference. I sat in on a couple of sessions there, and it is interesting that they did, and I don't know if any of you have different studies to prove otherwise, but they continue to say that the female voice is the preferred voice in a bot that you're interacting with. Has anybody found any other studies that speak differently to that? Okay, good. Let me look here. So Jennifer, do you think that people are influenced at using a Comcast service because of the ease of use for your remote? Have you done any research on that?
We've actually done a ton. We believe it's part of like building a compelling entertainment product for customers who love traditional TV, or for those who are interested in streaming services. We have a new streaming device that has a voice remote with it. And we know that once customers start using the remote, they start adopting it. And once they become heavy users, they're just significantly happier, and like their customer satisfaction data, it just comes through, which is great because our goal is to make their voice the ultimate shortcut. So just get them to what they want to watch as quickly as possible, reduce friction, make sure we're understanding them, that we're getting to the right place. So like there's places all along the way throughout that pipeline that we're studying to make sure that we can improve it and make it as seamless as possible. Because we know that when they like it, not only is their satisfaction rating high, they're also recommending it to friends, which is a great thing to be.
Right.
And so it is recognized as a great feature of the platform. The interesting thing we've seen is in this space, some of our competitors, like say Roku, they're actually charging for a voice remote. So, it's an interesting world that we're living in. And I'm curious to see what happens over the next couple of years, if the industry moves in different directions.
I have to say, I have a 2-year-old grandson who's already like grabbing things that look like a remote and talking to it.
Yeah.
Pointing it at the TV when he wants something on the show.
My children talked into the voice remote before they could read. So it was the great equalizer in the household. There was a lot of Ninjago going on. I have boys.
That's great. Now, I sat in on a workshop one day, and the challenge, it was all voice designers, voice user interface designers, and which I'm not, but I'm always, curious to learn more from them. And one of the exercises they were doing was negative words, like show me restaurants without Chinese. So I don't know if you've run any experiments around, eliminating things from the search. Like I want everything but restaurants with pizza, or I want restaurants that don't serve gluten. And so John, you probably had a lot of experience with that.
Well, there was some of that. And really what you saw, and this was, there's a company out there called SoundHound, which is, has a big voice assistant. And this is one of their demos, is getting into real detailed layers of, something with a patio, something that's dog friendly, right? All these detailed things. And if you can find those positive attributes, you could do negative attributes as well. It's a matter of how you're building your search queries and your underlying search database.
Right.
So it's doable. And at the end, whether it's us or whether it's SoundHound or whoever, we're searching something, right? We're not creating this data. We're searching something. So it's a search question. It's not a voice question, right? Because you're looking at some kind of underlying data store. So if you architect it in such a way that you can eliminate things, then that's not a difficult thing.
Yeah, a lot of if-then statements very built into the search.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to pause and let's see if there's questions from the audience. I don't see, Lori, I don't see any in the chat, but that doesn't mean they're not questions that people have to ask. So I'm going to open the floor up for anybody that has any questions for our audience here.
Yeah, we don't see anything in the chat yet, but absolutely unmute yourself if you have a question for the panel. Anyone? Well then, keep going.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, I don't know if you can speak to this. Are there other products coming out from Comcast that use voice?
Well, we're not doing any product announcements today, but I can tell you that we recently released a new remote for our streaming product. Our streaming device is called Flex, and we have a small, like a scaled down remote with it. It has fewer buttons, but it runs on the same voice system. The voice button's in a prominent space, and we're hearing really good reviews from the customers who have adopted it. So, I mean, it's been a couple months, but it's new. So.
Awesome. That's great. And this is for all of you. What is your favorite go-to intelligent assistant?
Mine was ours. It was great. It was perfect for everything I needed for it. Our whole premise was you use your mobile apps every day. And so if you can make them faster and easier to use using voice, then that's the way to go. And that was exactly what I used it for. It was all those things that you did every day, messaging, navigating, all those things. It just was super handy.
Is it still available?
No. Well, as far as I know, it's not. No.
Okay.
The buyer has focused it around their needs.
Okay. How about Damien? Wait, you're muted.
Well, I'm actually, it's a little different. I actually don't use any voice assistants. I do a lot of research. I do a lot of R&D. I do a lot of conversations about technology we're chasing. So I have all voice-enabled functions on my iPhone turned off. I just don't like the idea of a device listening to me and trying to figure out, because waiting for a wake word means it's still listening anyway. It's listening to every word I say and trying to figure out whether I said the wake word. At this stage, I don't have an Alexa at home. I don't have any of those because I just don't like the idea of something listening to every conversation I have. Now, that's one of the reasons I actually love the idea of Jennifer's device, where there is a push to talk, so I actually know when it's activated. I hate the idea that something in my home or in my phone at the office where I'm actually having a conversation and whiteboarding a concept, that something is listening to me at the time.
And Jennifer, what's yours?
So I'll pivot. I have them all. Yeah, I would say I think Alexa has become the family favorite. Although it's probably because we have more than one, and the kids can drop in on the other kid. Like it's become like a whole thing. It's like the intercom on steroids. Like, are you playing with my Legos?
That's great.
Yeah, but I will say, like, I totally understand where Damien's coming from. Like, you know, obviously, especially when you work in this space, you're going to be concerned. But in my role, I think it's very important to see what, you know, Google's doing, what Alexa's doing, what is Siri doing, and then to have an Apple TV and see the interplay between the HomePod and the Apple TV has been like super helpful for me from a, you know, just a technology standpoint. And then like sort of seeing how my family interacts with it, like, you know, getting a sense for like, I know I'm not normal. I'm not like a normal American who just like buys tech. Like, so it's just good to see like my husband and kids using things and just getting a sense for like,
Yeah.
this is actually fixing a problem for them. Or like, and when Alexa answers the math homework, well, yes, it is helping. But at the same time, like, you know, it's, you know, that listening aspect, the fact that there are false wake ups, like, you know, absolutely, these are things that, you know, the industry needs to be cognizant of. And then when you have a discussion about like you might need replacement windows and suddenly your Facebook ads are all replacement
Yes.
windows, you're like,
Yes.
ooh, how did that
Hmm.
happen?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, you know, I would say generally speaking, like there's a lot out there. It's good to be aware of it.
Absolutely. So I see a question in chat. Are service desk type products validating user and driving the transaction via voice?
I think it is. We saw a lot of this where there were voice companies that were really focused just on serving the kind of call center, those, and that was actually a pretty early adopter area for voice. One, because it was a clear value proposition, right? There's clear cost avoidance. And two, I think the technology was getting good enough that you actually could have your bot, and Jennifer, I'm sure can speak to this, serve your customers pretty well, to the point where I think some people actually were beginning to prefer that. They would just want to go into a bot session, a chat session with the bot, rather than even try and get a person on the line and tap and type.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I've seen where just voice to voice, let's say the technology detects the mood that person's in, and so it can give it to the agent that handles that type of mood better. It's a company based here in Chicago. I can't remember the name of them, but let's say if you're a fact, you're going to get to the person that gives you the facts. If you're more of a social talker, you're going to get more to you're going to get steered toward the agent that's more social.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a unique twist to it.
Yeah. So there's a lot in speech analytics and voice technology that we see every single day. But Jennifer, I'm sure you see that too, just within Comcast as a company in general.
Well, I mean, I would say John is right. Like we are absolutely looking at what people are saying. We're trying to learn from what they say, what they type into our chatbot experience. We're looking to our agents to help us refine how we answer. So there's definitely, good communication and good learnings that can happen on both sides of those transactions. And in terms of people being more comfortable with using like a chatbot experience, I definitely think there's a generational component to this. I mean, young people today, they don't make phone calls, they text their girlfriends. So, it's just like that, the paradigm has shifted. And I think, especially with the pandemic, we've really leaned into on the Comcast side, making sure that we can reach people digitally wherever they are. And so that's actually, I think for us, one of the big wins is really beefing up and making more use of these tools and making it more available. But there's always room for improvement.
Yeah. And we just partnered with a company out of Texas that, so those of you familiar with call centers, there's something called the quality analysts. And so they listen in on a call. They literally have to listen to a call that's recorded or live, and they have a scorecard that they manually check off or on their computer. So because our simulation technology can automatically score somebody in a simulation, we kept getting asked, well, can you do this with our recorded calls? This would be great, just to plug it into your simulator and grade it. So they actually have built an engine that can take every single recorded call and analyze it in almost real time and compare what was said against the scorecard that particular campaign has, which is huge and is going to be a game changer for these contact centers. So it's taking that, transcribing the call, looking at the the words and phrases in that call and how it matches up to that section of the call and what's being done in the call, and then scoring it. So we're just now introducing it to a couple of our customers. And, so I asked the quality analyst, I said, so if you're not sitting there listening to a call, which, you're, is below your pay grade, what can you do in the organization? So now they're going to be able to be more strategic, just like RDP has done in organizations, where it's freed up that accountant or that CPA. Instead of like doing spreadsheets all day long, they can now be a much more strategic player within the organization. So I think there's going to be a lot of voice technology out there that's similar to RDP, where it's going to automate that process and free those people up to be much more strategic in that organization. So great question. Any other questions from the audience here? No. Okay, I've got just so the other, let's see here.
I can ask, I don't know how relevant this is, but something Damien said had me thinking, because we're a small company and I have 2 assistants who are me in different applications. And so if my voice is not available, they just use my password, or what happens in that case?
So in an environment like ours, let's say if you had our technology and you wanted to actually provide one of them access, you can actually onboard them as a co-account or a co-voice into your account, and that would allow that. But also it means that you can remotely allow them in, right? So say you're at home, but you're not in the office, but someone in the office wants to get access. You can provide your voice sample for that instance. They can get access, but once they get out, they can't get back in because they don't actually have your password. So the problem with passwords is, say you hand over your password, but and like I said before, a lot of people reuse these passwords, right? Between your Hotmail, your Gmail, and your corporate network. It's the same password. Now, you've given someone your password, you can't really take it back easily because it is so widely used in general. So this is a way where you can either have, like I said, have co-account holders, or you can authenticate remotely, just allow someone in just for that instance.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Yeah, that's neat. So for all the panelists, people don't understand sometimes the complexity of designing these voice dialogues. And I'll give you an example. So I gave a presentation where I said, let's just answer a yes, no question. Did you meet sales quota? Yes or no? Well, what if they don't say yes or no? So you always have to start to account for the non-compliant response. So a lot of times when Siri doesn't understand you, you said something in a way that didn't fall into their domain or their understanding of the context of what you're saying. So I don't know if any of you can kind of speak to have you developed systems, or are there resources that you've leaned on to kind of help you build those dialogue scripts so that it takes into account all the different possibilities of what's being said? Or are you using machine learning for that? Would probably be the simplest answer.
But didn't you conclude from that, Nancy, if the answer wasn't yes, that it was no, regardless of whatever the verbiage that went with it?
No. Well, what if they said none of your business?
Well,
if they said none of your business, then where do you go? So you have to always have to have that alternative, because Alexa will say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that, and then you got to ask it again or ask it a different way.
Yeah.
So even the very simple, dialogues suddenly become this huge dialogue tree of all the different possibilities of where that conversation can go.
This was really the core of our natural language understanding. Was our goal was to make it so that our platform would understand whatever variation you said. And there's, for any command, you think it's pretty straightforward, and then there's a million different variants. And we thought it was critical to be able to understand all those variants that people might come up with. And so we had a very sophisticated AI, this is our team in Ireland, that would go out and they built what they called discourse communities. So they would go out and they would, if the topic was Java, they're understanding that Java can mean coffee, it can mean, programming language. And then they're building these relationships of communities that are talking about Java in the context of coffee. And they're extracting all the different ways people address this and how do they talk about Java. That's exactly what they were doing to understand lots of different natural language ways that people might express the same command. And it's a very sophisticated process that they built using AI. And so it's critical though, if you want to get to, users are not going to use voice if they have to learn a syntax. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
They need to be able to speak naturally. And one of the frustrations, I think, for a lot of people in the voice industry is that consumer tolerance for a voice experience is incredibly low relative to how difficult the technology is, right? People try it twice, and if it doesn't work, they just conclude it sucks and they never use it again. It's really hard, and you don't get much credit for how hard the problem is. You got to get it right.
100%. Yeah, we run into that, because we know what we're designing training. There's only a few ways you should say something in a particular transaction. But you're right. I mean, if it doesn't hear you say it, a lot of times somebody will speak really fast.
Yep.
So we build into our simulations, if they don't get the right response in the second attempt, the bot says, hey, maybe you're speaking too fast or not enunciating. Please slow down and enunciate, so that, they obviously their expectations, you're right, they get it twice, they're like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I don't like this technology, it doesn't work. Well, you're probably not using it right either, so there's different, we give them the rules around, how to play with this particular type of application. But you're right, there's not a lot of patience for people out there.
And I think understanding human behavior is actually important. There's a whole study on human factors too, and that we use some consultants in that space to actually help us drive the consumer to where we want them to go. I got a funny story. Anything you say on a screen, people will sometimes misinterpret. So if we say if we say the word count from 50 to 70, some people will actually count from 50 to 70, and some people will actually say count from 50 to 70, right? And you think, well, how am I going to try to present this in a way where you're not going to just read what's on the screen, but you're actually going to do what you're told? And that can be quite a challenge sometimes. But there was a whole study around it, and we try to use some expertise. But also once we built our apps, and once we start seeing some of the variants that people are coming up with, our AI is being able to actually engineer that to start understanding more about what people are saying. And like you said, go back and say, hey, we didn't ask you to say the words count from 50 to 70. We actually meant you just say 50, 51, 52, and actually count it out.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's we had a script the other day. It says the total fee for this is $6,010. And so we're showing on the screen what to say is kind of the level one. And then I put .00. Well, the guy says $6,010 and 0 cents. So I'm just like, are they going to say 0 cents? Or are they just going to say $6,010? I mean, it's just, the iteration and iteration and iteration. There's so much testing that has to go on with voice scripts and responses. Yeah. And, that's where, for us, I would love to have a full-time resource of just somebody just sits there and tests the right thing, tests saying the wrong thing, tests saying a combination of things. And I'm sure, Jennifer, you've got like a whole slew of people that are just sitting there doing nothing but testing all the time.
Oh, I was listening to what John and Damien were saying. We have a team that does annotation work. And so they will look for utterances, and we will think the conversation tree starts here, and we will train based on what we think that tree looks like. And then we'll put it out into the wild, and then right. I mean, it's fascinating to watch, because humans are so adaptable and creative and inventive with language, which is a good thing. We just have to figure out how to make our machine models keep up with that. And so there's a lot that there's just a lot of opportunity in that space, because there's so much complexity. And I think as you start training these things, you can get better at them. But the point you brought up about someone saying "and 0 cents," like that is precisely the issue.
Yeah. It's my everyday nightmare, but
yeah, they're going to say no sense too.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, so luckily I can put wildcard characters in there to allow for them to say anything, but yeah, it's rough. Let me ask the three of you, are there any resources or books, or if somebody's really curious to start getting into this and exploring NLP and bot technology, have you seen any books out there that you would recommend?
As far as the voice industry goes, voicebot.ai is a really good blog. Brett Kinsella, who runs that, does a good job of covering kind of all the developments out there, but it's not technical resources. We had technical blog posts on our website that, got into some of this stuff, but it's an arcane science, a lot of this stuff, and you really have to, some of it's academic. So it's not necessarily easily accessible.
Right.
Yeah. The other place we're looking at is the Open Voice Network.
Yes.
They're actually, I think, based in Chicago also. I think they're Chicago based, and they've got they do some interesting chats about the technology and about voice commands and stuff like that. So that's probably worth looking into too. They're not a technical resource, but they're more, the flows and how the stuff works rather than actually getting into the tech behind it.
Yeah, and there's an association called Women in Voice. It's really growing quite a bit. I was trying to get a chapter started here in Chicago and couldn't get some folks to jump on board with me. So some of you on the call today, if you want to get involved in a Chicago chapter of Women in Voice, let me know, because there isn't one. The closest one is Michigan. I mean, they've got I think 30 chapters all over the world. So it's helping promote, women that are involved in voice technology. So that would be another resource just for anybody curious, because I do a lot of events and have a book club. So I'm sure they'll allow men to peek in once in a while. Well, my questions are all done. So I don't know if there's, I want to leave time for the audience, but I don't know what happened to our audience. So I think, they're out enjoying our good weather today, which is very rare for Chicago at this time of year. So I suspect they're enjoying their COVID outdoor time to get away. So I don't know if anybody has any additional questions from the audience here.
Me again. I'm just curious about the future of this technology. Like, how will it be used? What are some things we're not even thinking about? Perhaps.
Good question.
I mean, my feeling is that you're going to see voice as becomes your primary interface to a lot of your technology. Certainly your phone, any devices that you carry with you, I think voice is going to end up being the primary interface there. Your car as well. You're seeing it some in the car today, but I think you're going to see it just become pervasive. And in fact, that was one of the things we used to kind of talk about is, do you end up with the same kinds of problems that you have now with people, putting in their earbuds and just tuning everybody out, except it's going to be the opposite problem. Everybody's just going to be like talking just out in the open, in the middle of wherever you are. And that's, I think there's going to be some social graces that are going to have to come along here with the advent of voice.
Yes.
And I see it as, and I think it's really going to be that replacement for that keyboard.
Yep.
Right. And we can give commands and we can speak and we can actually give commands a lot faster with speech than with typing. So it's a transition away from us sitting at a keyboard, whether it's a keyboard on your iPhone or a keyboard on your laptop or desktop. It's the ability to be able to speak. I mean, if I can get my thoughts, especially when it comes to any tech or any kind of R&D work, if I can get it transcribed correctly, that's huge compared to me sitting down and writing a 10-page paper on it. So I think that's where we're going. I think we'll eventually, and I think the CES a couple of years ago, there was a prediction that keyboards won't be around in the next 5 to 10 years. And I see that voice is going to be the way once the keyboard's gone.
As long as it translates my voice, and I assume it learns my voice and gets better at those words, because, now when I use it on my cell phone, I'm always like, now I got to go back and correct that word and correct that word, correct that word.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
But the interesting thing is, as humans, it's two sides. Both sides are learning, right? So the computers and the AI is learning what you're saying, but we're also learning how to make it work. I mean, that's what we do, right? So I find that, I've got a bit of an accent. So some words, the speech to text on my iPhone won't work. But I've actually now learned how to say them better so that I can do speech to text and it'll continue to work. So I think both sides are going to learn. The human using it will learn how to speak better, and the device will learn how to understand it better. So I think that convergence is coming, and the technology is so much better. If you think about speech to text 5 years ago compared to today, we're miles ahead from where we were. So I
Yes.
think in the next 5 years, we'll get to a point where we can have this kind of conversation with the computer, and the computer will be able to understand that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I see a question. Do you see set voice-based in applications in manufacturing? And if yes, who's working on this? The only one I've seen is warehouses where you're wearing a headset and it's telling you which row and aisle to pick from, and then you hit the barcode, and so it sends it to the ERP system, or the system is tracking all the inventory and things like that. So I don't know if anybody else has seen anything similar to that or different.
That was where we saw quite a bit of is the kind of the logistics space. And I think if you think about it broadly, anything where hands-free is better, you're going to see voice. And it turns out that there's going to be a lot of those places. So we saw in logistics in particular, Honeywell was working in this. They were trying to come up with a headset-based application to do your kind of pick and pack stuff. One of the areas that we thought was interesting is all of the back office or back restaurant kinds of areas for fast food restaurants, right? Which now there's a manual which tells you how to do this or that. In the future, you're going to have a headset that tells you how do you chop onions, and you can ask it in whatever language you come up with, and it's going to show you on a screen how to do it. It's going to show you a video. That's all of these things are going to move towards hands-free interactions with this kind of technology.
I've read a case study around a hospital where a doctor might be in an operating room and, show me x-rays on XYZ patient, as they're kind of trying to, hopefully not in the middle of the operation, maybe before they cut into them, but their voice commands of, show me their records so that I can understand, the patient and what's going on here.
Yeah. And one step further than that is surgeons watching YouTube videos too. I happen to know that this is not uncommon for operations that people don't do frequently or haven't done a long time. And so you can see that happening interoperatively as well, particularly when you get to a certain step. You could certainly see that happening.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I just took a standard IVR and built a how-to step-by-step change a flat tire. Everybody's got a phone. If you're out stranded, you can't get your, AAA or whatever, call this number. It's step 1, put the emergency brake on. and then I designed it to say, you just press the pound key when you're ready for the next step, so similar to push to talk. And, so there's lots of ways that you can use voice and voice commands and hands-free, certainly in manufacturing, but, you're right, John, I think, and everybody, we're going to see a lot more of that. Anybody else?
Okay, I have another question.
Okay.
So I was again thinking about something Damien said about the voice waves, and then they're really looking at the ones above what we would hear. And so are those specifically unique to me, or could someone like Jim Carrey, mimic my voice and be able to also then mimic what's above what we're hearing? And then I have a second question around security. Is voice as secure as like a fingerprint or an eyeball?
Okay. So to answer your first question, to mimic a person's voice is near impossible. So they are very unique. And actually, if you actually listen to someone who mimics other people, like a Jim Carrey, you'll actually find that what makes them sound like you is not the actual tone they're making. It's the phraseology, or the way you enunciate words, the way you string words together is what makes them sound like you. It's not every tone they make, right? So being able to, it is near impossible to get your voice, someone else to create your voice. The other thing is, for a human ear, if you can't hear it, you can't make it, right? So the stuff that you can't hear, it's going to be impossible for them to make. So that's the that's hopefully that answers your question. I can't remember your second question, or somehow I lost my train of thought.
It's about voice, eyeball, thumb, fingerprint, because your unique fingerprint. So
interestingly, voice is actually more secure than any other form of biometric. And there's a reason for that. When you're looking at a thumb or a fingerprint or a retina scan, you've got an image, you've got a one-shot image, and you're actually matching points on it, same as a facial recognition, right? So you have to make a decision based on that one shot, one image, you go yes or no. But with a voice, I have the option. If I don't know that, if I'm borderline, I can ask you more questions. I can just continue to make you speak, right? So I can get you to a point where I'm absolutely sure you are who you are, depending on the value of the transaction. So what that means is that, say, for example, if I want to check the balance on a prepaid calling card, I don't need a lot of security, so I could probably go off a second of speech. But you're a corporate, CFO, and you're paying a $1 million bill. I may want you to speak for 10 seconds because I may want to really absolutely make sure that authentication is right. You can't do that with face. You can't do that with fingerprint. You can do that with retina scan because they're one-time images. So that is really the value of speech. It's really a behavioral biometric. The other part that is really important about when you're thinking about biometrics is I've heard of people where you can grab an iPhone if you got facial. So I have an iPhone 12 Max. I don't have facial recognition turned on it. Because if I'm at an airport, I travel a lot still, even through COVID, I still travel. Someone can pick up my iPhone, flash it at me, and it will unlock the phone.
Yeah.
Right? Speech, you need to actually speak. So I have a choice to make. I've got to actually make a choice to speak. So there's that factor too, that I've got to have a choice. I've got to actually speak to get authenticated. It's not like facial where someone can just flash their phone at your face. I mean, one of my guys that work for me, and he always talks about his son just grabs his phone when they're in the car, and we'll grab it and point it at him, unlock it, and change the music channel. Right? I mean, it can be done. When it comes to fingerprints and stuff like that, they are. If you think about it from a logic perspective, you talk about thumbprint. It's 2 inches by 1 inch. Think about statistics. We're 7.2 billion people on the planet. What are the odds of duplicates? How many combinations can you fit into such a small space, right? There are some. I mean, all those biometrics have their places and their levels of security. But speech, when you're talking about what I would also call a commercially viable device like a phone, is the best biometric because we don't have to have expensive cameras. We don't have to have expensive heat detection in our thumbprint readers. We can just make you speak as long as we want till we confirm your ID.
So the next Tom Cruise movie, instead of like cutting somebody's thumb off or their eyeball,
the vocal cord, right?
Speak.
But how do you do that? I mean, you have to make them speak, I guess. Yes.
Well, I was wondering when you said that, what about if I'm under stress or something? Does that impact the ability for me to activate my phone or to do something like that?
Well, we can detect stress. So we can detect stress, and our AI will pick up stress, and it will adjust to it. But it also learns what you're doing, right? What your normal patterns are. So a lot of times you find that employees, when they're logging in, they when they're onboarding, they're calm. They're sitting in the HR office. They're actually onboarding in a real calm environment. But they're running late to work every day. So by the time they get into work and they're trying to get into their systems, they have 1 minute off time. They've got to be on the clock. So our AI actually will learn that stress and work with it. Now, the one thing that we are looking for future is to see whether we can use that detection of stress to detect other things. Like, for example, when I walk into my house, if I'm stressed, can my alarm pick that up rather than disarming the alarm, right? That's an area of study we're looking at, but that's not commercial yet for us. I mean, we adjust for stress to still allow you access, but we haven't gone to a point where we're saying we're going to use stress to deny you something because there may be something wrong in the background.
Right.
Right. Interesting. Huh, that's great. It's fascinating stuff.
Can I put in a safe word then?
Yeah, you can. I mean, that you can. Yeah. You can. I mean, we do have the ability for you to say certain words and we'll pick up that there is something wrong there. It's no different than having an alarm and you put in a certain code and it turns the alarm off but calls the police. Same kind of concept.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
That's great. That's great. Well, I will wrap things up here. We've got, we're almost to the bottom of the hour. I don't know if anyone from hub88 has any closing words, but our panels have been fantastic and we really appreciate you guys enlightening us to NLP and voice technology and where it's going.
Thank you all.
Any closing words, Lori?
I do not have any closing words other than to thank the panelists just like you did. It was really, really interesting. And also to remind everyone to come and tell everyone about our June, I'm checking the date because I can't remember. It's June 9th, the next Tech Talk with that C-level women in tech conversation. So that's going to be really interesting.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
All
Have
the
a good
best.
evening.